A closer look at Chapter 85 of Jin Ping Mei. Chun Mei is gone. In the past, there were only two kinds of relationships between strange men and women: close relationship and no relationship. Ruanji lay drunk under the pomegranate skirt and became completely clean. This can only happen in the new sayings of the world that make people look up to him. In the world of Jin Ping Mei, watching two dogs making love gives rise to envy. Animals can still have such joy, not to mention people who don't. Therefore, if there is a relationship between husband and wife, it must involve adultery. Before Pan Jinlian entered the palace, Simon King praised Pan Jinlian's beauty in front of Wu Yunyang. No matter how dull she was, Wu Yunyang must have known that these two were not thieves and prostitutes. Later, rumors spread that Pan Jinlian killed her husband and remarried. And then there was another accident between Pan Jinlian and Meng Yulu's bookboy. As for Simon King, his brother's wife, and Mrs. Lin from the Jiaoshuan mansion of Chongmen Shenyuan, they were all involved. Qiu complained several times. Did Wu Yunyang really not believe it? Maybe he just doesn't want to admit it and tries his best to maintain the appearance of respectability. Pan Jinlian was invincible in the past. She avoided Wu Song's revenge, planned to kill Song Huilian, Guanzhi, Li Ping'er, and Simon King, and successfully passed the blame for the deaths of Wang Liuer and Mrs. Lin. Qiu complained and escaped again and again. There is no trace of failure, but people will be arrogant. Pan Jinlian was deeply immersed in lust and could not extricate herself. She deliberately forgot about the peeping eyes of Simon's family, and forgot that Chen Jingjing was also dependent on others, and was unable to take responsibility for the future. As for learning from Li Jiar and leaving Simon's house as soon as possible to start over, neither she nor Chen Jingji had planned on it. This pair of men and women, dominated by the passion in their bodies, are destined to capsize. In the past, under the protection of Simon King, Pan Jinlian had no sense of security at all. She had a very high sense of danger. Before anyone was aware of it, she could find the mines, find the direction, and plan carefully. Why is she not planning at all now? None. There is probably only one explanation. Pan Jinlian, who is arrogant on the surface, has already collapsed in her heart. She was involved in a lawsuit for killing Wu Da after leaving the Simon family. What kind of man could she find to cover the whole world? When she leaves Simon's house, it must be Mrs. Wang who is the matchmaker. This Mrs. Wang's circle of friends cannot be compared with Aunt Wen and Aunt Su. They are just pawns and horse dealers. Faced with problems that they are completely unable to solve, people naturally avoid it. And Chen Jingjing having an affair was a way of escaping from reality. After a long time, she even forgot about it. In the future, when desire rises, I will sink into it and be unable to extricate myself. Even more powerless than her was Chen Jingjing, a junior whose family had undergone tremendous changes at the age of 16. After relying on Simon King for several years, he had earlier lost the courage and ability to make a living on his own. How can such a pair of people be together without being crushed into mincemeat by reality? Two people, overwhelmed by reality, swam too far in the deep sea of desire and could never return to shore. Soon Pan Jinlian became pregnant. While Wu Yunyang was away from home, Pan Jinlian said to Chen Jingjing, "While your father was here, I asked Aunt Su Fu Yaoyi to have the baby safely, but there was no sign of her. Today he was nowhere to be seen. I have been with you for a long time, and then I have a child. I will take advantage of your aunt's future home to ask for medicine for miscarriage, and get rid of the miscarriage as soon as possible." Abortion is one of the consequences that women must bear after sexual liberation. Giving birth to a baby in the toilet and throwing it away turned out to be exactly what Pan Jinlian did 400 years ago. A fetus born in vain was discovered by a man who dug it out. Scandals abound. Wu Yunyang came home from an outing and was still recovering from her exhaustion. Qiu, who had been frustrated by Pan Jinlian, came to complain again. Xiao Yu scolded him out again. With Xiao Yu as a good helper, Pan Jinlian has nothing to fear. I often walk by the river without getting my shoes wet. When Pan Jinlian and Chen Jingji were having sex in the flower building again, Qiu saw it and went to sue her again, but was caught. Wu Yunyang scolded Chen Jingji. "I paid you the same amount and asked the boy to come in and get it. How can I do it again?" What are you doing in the widow's room? You're shameless." After a few words of scolding, Jingji went out to save money and water, and was desperate. He also tried his best to scold Pan Jinlian. "Sixth sister, don't be so shameless from now on. As the saying goes, men are sexless and have no steel. Women are sexless and rotten as sesame candy. You have to be determined for yourself and fight for men. Like, I went to offer incense and was forced to do so by strong men. If I was not upright, I would not be able to come home. The golden lotus eats the moon and says," her face red and white in embarrassment. Wu Yunyang's words were justified, but as the saying goes, a good wife and a beautiful concubine. As the principal wife, Wu Yunyang must be virtuous to maintain her position as the principal wife and earn a living. Pan Jinlian must be beautiful, must be sexy, and must be able to smell her odor from a distance in order to seduce men without getting tired of her. This is her livelihood, and if you are sexy, you will naturally have a romantic affair. Pan Jinlian was ashamed. She didn't think there was anything wrong with having an affair. There's really nothing wrong with that. After Pan Jinlian was sold as a child, this was all the education she received. Wu Yunyang could stand up and talk without pain. Why should she let Pan Jinlian give up her skills? Since elementary school, Xiao Pan has become a virtuous person. Can she, Wu Yunyang, really treat her as a sister and stay with her till the end of her life? Not to mention that Pan Jinlian didn't believe it, even Meng Yilu didn't believe it. Wu Yunyang re-established the rules, and only Dian and Ping'an came to run errands when picking up things. The two never had the chance to meet again. Pan Jinlian the woman was alone there. The day was like 3 autumns, and the night was like midsummer. How could she keep this empty room silent? She was burning with desire. It was extremely difficult to meet him. When Pan Jinlian wore a big green cloth shirt, she would often look at people under the curtain and dress like a seductress. But at that time she didn't want to crawl into bed with anyone. Later, Simon King married Meng Yilu and neglected her for more than a month. She was anxious, but she was not burning with desire. Those who are close to Mo are black. Those who are close to Simon King are obscene. Pan Jinlian fell all the way into the abyss of desire, unaware that the abyss was also staring at her. Being constantly accused, having abortions, and being discovered by Wu Yunyang, none of these could make her look up from the abyss. Her sky is dark, and there is no light. Desire continues to swell in darkness and fog. How much true love does she have for Chen Jingji? Have no idea, but without him, Pan Jinlian would die of thirst. Unable to meet each other, Chen Jingji took out a couple of silver coins and wrote a poem red embroidered shoes for Pan Jinlian. The out temple burns the skin and flesh, the water from Lankiao floods the throat, and the sound of the wind fills Nanzhou. After it is washed away, it is still stained, but when it is achieved, it is romantic, even if it is not very good. Pan Jinlian returned a white silk handkerchief, a gold ring, and a poem. The two of them are still like children who are at the mercy of fate, just letting their own feelings, being in love with each other, letting others tear them apart, and not caring at all in the world. But Wu Yunyang admires keeping integrity, and the incident between Chen Jingji and Pan Jinlian is not only insulting to the family tradition, but also a huge threat to brother Xiao who has been born. How could she just stop after cursing a few words? Sister-in-law Zhu, a cunning matchmaker, used to cheat Meng Yilu into marrying her. Now, she knew that Wu Yunyang wanted to sell Chunmai, but she didn't tell her. After getting a reply from Pan Jinlian and earning a tael of silver, she said that Wu Yunyang wanted her to take away the spring plums and sell them. Chen Jingjing was only focused on Pan Jinlian and didn't care when he heard this. He said calmly, "Mother Zhu, please stay at home. I will meet him at your house another day and ask him if I have anything to say." When Pan Jinlian heard that Chunmai was about to be sold, she opened her eyes and was speechless for a long time, and her eyes filled with tears. He shouted, "Sister-in-law Zhu, look at how hard it is for my 2 unmanly mothers. He died a few hours ago today, and he sent the people around me away. His end is so unkind and righteous. She relies on him to raise her. He stomped the person into the mud because of a urinary bladder. Leaping her as child was still dead for a week and a half, and the measles and pox rash hadn't appeared yet. He knew what God was planning, so he was so high-spirited that he blocked out the sun. Pan Jinlian and Chun Mai were gone. Whatever the mistake was, it was because Wu Yunyang had no heart and wanted to harm her and her mother. The word guilt has never been in her life dictionary, and the ghosts of Wuhan University, Song Huilian, Li Ping'er, and Brother Guan have never appeared in Pan Jinlian's dreams. Pan Jinlian has learned skills all her life and wants to bloom in the world. Fate has always owed her harm. Over time, she has positioned herself as a victim, overreacting to anything she encounters. Her reaction, resistance, and counterattack are so instinctive and so fierce. For thousands of years, in the history of literature, they have been the virtuous and disciplined women. Shu, in front of these repeated suffocating pale faces, she is so unique, intimidating, and so full of life tension. Brother Guan died, and Li Ping'er died of grief. There was probably no one who didn't hate Pan Jinlian. This woman was too ruthless in her fight for favor, knowing clearly that it was the concubine system that caused her to be so cruel. She couldn't forgive her at all. Now, fate has not let her go, nor has her orthodox chastity let her go. They are finally going to deal with her because of her sexual liberation, but her eyes full of tears it is not unpleasant. But human nature makes the reader unable to help but feel a little pity. There are all poor victims. Fate has accumulated too much anger, injustice, and unwillingness in her life in advance, and it will be more lethal when it erupts. As for the way of a gentleman in the 4 books and 5 classics, she was literate and learned various skills from elementary school. Do you think this is what she learned? What about Kai Zhuangyuan and Song Yeshi Kai Teishi, who have spent their whole lives studying the books of saints and sages? Just as Pan Jinlian said, the god of danger collides with the longevity star. You can't say I'm good, and I can't think you are short. Just because you look decent on the outside does not mean your heart is really red. Chun Mai, on the other hand, had no tears at all, seeing Pan Jinlian crying. She said, "Mother, why are you crying? The slave is gone, please be patient and don't worry about it. If you get sick from thinking, no one will know that you are in pain. When the slave goes out, don't take your clothes with you. Since ancient times, good men do not share the same meal, and good women do not wear wedding clothes." The greatest light in Pan Jinlian's life was not a man or a relative, but Chun Mai. She was the one who was about to be sold, but she comforted Pan Jinlian every word. Once Chun Mai passed away, Pan Jinlian was completely alone in the world. If you get sick from thinking, no one will know that you are in pain or fever. Zhang Zhubo couldn't help but criticize. It's touching, and it has the feeling of knowing oneself through the ages. They have long transcended master and servant, and have a life and death friendship. A woman's friendship goes much smoother without a man, and even if there is one between them, they are still deep and sincere. Chun Mai has an innate strong aura and can remain calm in any situation. Wu Shengshan had a fortune telling and predicted that she would be crowned with phoenix crowns and beautiful women in the future, which was exactly her inner preset for her life. You still don't know who I am? I am Chun Mai's signature advertisement. Now, what if I was sent away again and left naked? How could the person who can make her look beautiful in the future look at the clothes that decorate her beauty? Losing the stable wealth in front of you is a loss or victimization in the eyes of others. Only Chun Mai thinks this is her chance in life. Wu Yunyang sent Xiao Yu to supervise, but Xiao Yu felt that Wu Yunyang was acting recklessly and unreliably, hiding things from others and making her own decisions, trying her best to let Chun Mai go out with dignity. Wu Niang take out his box and pick it up. He had 2 sets of sexy bags, and asked sister-in-law Zhu to take them for him. Just to make a thought, it would also be his turn. Teach me to take the sweat scarf and green hairpin worn by Chun Mai. Pan Jinlian picked out 2 sets of colored long-legged clothes and shoes, packed them in a big bag, and gave Chun Mai some of her hairpin combs and rings. Xiao Yu also pulled out 2 hairpins from her head and handed them to Chun Mai. Wu Yunyang was greedy for money, so the valuable beaded tassels, silver silk cloud buns, and gold-embroidered skirts and jackets were all carried to the back. Before going out, Pan Jinlian, who still wanted to stay at Simon's house, asked Chun Mai to pay homage to Yunyang and the others, but Xiao Yu waved her hand and stopped her. Chun Mai didn't say much. She broke up with Mrs. Ding Shu and walked out of the house without looking back. He has the spirit of a strong man to leave. Only Pan Jinlian, who was stunned by fate, fell into her own miserable feeling. Jinlian returned to the room. There were always spring plums. The mother and daughter were in love with each other, and they talked intimately, but today he has gone. Lost, the room felt desolate and lonely, and I burst into tears without realizing it. What she didn't know was that this was her eternal farewell to Chiang Mai. She will take her last breaths, and the plum blossoms will bloom soon. What she has, Chiang Mai will have, and what Wu Yunyang has, Chiang Mai will also have. A closer look at Chapter 86 of Jin Ping Mei. Pan Jinlian's dream of becoming a wealthy family was shattered. The scandal involving Chen Jingji and Jin Lian Chiang Mai was finally caught and raped in bed by Wu Yunyang due to Qiu Ju's persistent denunciation. Chiang Mai is a maid, and Wu Yunyang has supreme power over her, so without any hesitation, she immediately asked Mrs. Zhu to take Chiang Mai away and sell it. Yunyang is actually a very ruthless person. At first, Chiang Mai was her maid. After Jinlian arrived, Simon King gave Chiang Mai to Jinlian to be her servant. After all, it was a master-servant situation, but she showed no mercy. Although she was kicked out because her scandal was exposed, Chiang Mai left with great momentum. She is an independent and strong woman at heart, and she is not willing to be just a maid with no status. She had to make a decision. Jinlian's eyes were filled with tears, but there was nothing she could do. Chen Jingji, on the other hand, was thinking about Chiang Mai and went to Mrs. Zhu's house to see her. Mrs. Zhu at this time was similar to Mrs. Wang's face when Simon King hooked up with Pan Jinlian. Without money, everything is lost. If you have money, everything is easy. After taking the money and drinking, Sister-in-law Zhu also confided a little bit of her heart. Sister-in-law Zhu also had to drinks with him. And she said something to Yunyang cruelly. It's impossible for a beautiful girl to come out of the house with a piece of clothing and a hairpin ring. Even if you go to the master's house, the appearance is not good looking. It still costs the original price. Just pour water from this bowl to that bowl. And also throw some. It turns out that this kind of brainstorming, temporary, when he went out. Luckily, little girl Xiao Yu did a favor and taught his mother to bring 2 pieces of clothing with him. No, when you go to someone else's house, what do you bring to cover? Of course, there is another reason why Mrs. Zhu said Yunyang was stingy. It is relatively difficult to sell a penniless spring plum, and it is also difficult to sell it at a high price. Wu Yunyang's greed for money is as consistent as ever, just like her stupidity. Zhu's sisters-in-law knew that she was greedy for money, and they also knew that she was stupid and easy to fool. So when she was scolded by Yunyang for secretly letting Chen Jingji have a tryst with Chiang Mai, Mrs. Zhu's clever words left Yunyang speechless. Not only that, she also took advantage of Yunyang's eagerness to sell Chiang Mai, and took the opportunity to lower the price of Chiang Mai from the 16 taels of silver that Yunyang asked for at the beginning to 13 taels. In fact, Chiang Mai sold it for a high price of 50 taels of silver. Sister-in-law Zhu was supposed to have died and handed over 13 taels of silver to Wu Yunyang, and returned the 37 taels to herself. In addition, she also openly accepted the agency fee of 5 taels of silver from Wu Yunyang. The person who bought Chiang Mai was Zhou Xiaobai, who brought Wu Shengshan to tell fortunes for Simon King and his family. On the day when Wu Shengshan's fortune-telling said that Chiang Mai would be crowned with phoenix crowns and harems, Wu Yunyang was quite dissatisfied and thought it was an infringement of her status. She never imagined that she herself would send Chiang Mai to the road of Fengwang Xiaopei. If she had been in Xiamen Mansion, Chiang Mai would not have had this opportunity. When Zhou Xiaobai saw Chiang Mai again, she looked even more enchanting and happy than a few years ago. Pan Jinlian's life is now bleak, and the spring of Chiang Mai has just arrived. There are 2 stepmothers in Jin Ping Mei. One is Pan Jinlian, who is the stepmother of Wu Die's daughter Yinger, and the other is Wu Yunyang, who was the stepmother of Ximen's eldest sister. Although Yunyang did not beat or scold her stepdaughter like Jinlian, she had never shown any care for her eldest sister. When Li Pinger was still alive, she was the only person who had a good relationship with her eldest sister and was willing to help her. At this time, Chen Jingji's scandal broke out. If Wu Yunyang had any sympathy for her stepdaughter, she would not treat Chen Jingji like a stinky dog. Not giving out her daily meal at noon, Jingji went to his uncle's house for dinner every day, and Yunyang didn't ask any questions. It's Meng Yulu's birthday, so we have to arrange several nights of wine, food and snacks for Chen Jingji and Mr. Fu. Yunyang was not even sure. By driving him away completely, you can completely swallow up all his gold and silver boxes, so that he can prevent him from yelling blindly every day and he will be killed one day. If he wants to leave, Sister Ximen will naturally leave too. In this way, all the Ximen family property naturally belongs to her and Simon King's only son. Yunyang may have forgotten that when Chen Jingji first came to Ximen's house, she liked this little son-in-law very much. She was the one who unswervingly introduced Chen Jingji into the backyard to get acquainted with the women. It was Yunyang and no one else who was thinking about why didn't you invite your brother-in-law here all day long. Even such purely female behavior as playing on the swing has Jingji come to help other ladies push the swing. There's no guarantee that Chen Jingji's wild ambitions weren't about to start from the fluttering skirts of other ladies at that time. Wu Yunyang, who had no chance of leaving the house, did not have any hormonal feelings towards Chen Jingji at that time. Maybe it was because she had evil intentions in the first place that Yunyang fainted and fell to the ground when Chen Jingji said nonsense and revenged that brother Xiao was his son. Of course, Chen Jingji's nonsense was the direct reason why he was eventually kicked out. After selling Chen Mai and driving out Jingji, it was Pan Liu's turn. Wu Yunyang had no intention of driving Jin Lian away immediately, but Jin Lian offended to many people. When Ximen King was alive, no one dared to do anything to her. Now that Ximen King is dead, Jin Lian can be manipulated by anyone. She probably never imagined that one day she would be plotted by Sun Zue. In fact, Pan Jinlian never thought about leaving Ximen courtyard. She was neither like Li Jiar, who stole gold, packed up her bed and returned to the brothel as fast as Ximen King died. Nor did she even entertain the thought of remarrying like Meng Yulu did. She seems to have accepted her fate, obeyed Ximen King's will, and lived a good life with her sisters. In addition to finding a sense of presence with Chen Jingji, Pan Jinlian was very honest during this period. She had worked so hard to get into this compound. And although she was just a little wife, in her opinion, this was a brand new beginning. Although Ximen Mansion is not as grand as Wang Zhaoxuan's mansion, it is already a world of difference compared to her tailor's family. The house she rented on Cross Street and Wuhan University. Moreover, in Wang Zhaoxuan's mansion, she was the lowest status thing. Here, she was at least half a master. Entering the Ximen courtyard was no less important to her than marrying into a wealthy family, realizing a cross-border class transition. Although she is a little wife, she is well-dressed, well-fed, and has maids to serve her and servants to call on her. And she lives alone in the garden instead of living with Yunyang Li Jiar and Meng Yulu. It seems that Zhao Xiaoxing has specially created a utopia for her, putting her in a dreamland that seems to belong to Ximen King alone. Li Ping'er's intrusion shattered her dream, so she wanted to get rid of Li Ping'er at all costs and regain her only favorite. After Ximen King died, of course she couldn't be a chaste and martyr woman, but she certainly didn't see any signs of remarrying or running away. So when she saw Wang Po, she was really surprised. As soon as the Golden Lotus saw Mrs. Wang in the room, she opened her eyes, said blessings to her, and sat down. When Mrs. Wang said she would take her out immediately, Jin Lian refused. Jin Lian said, "How long have I been dead? What wrong did I do? What evil did I do? How can I be sent away in peace?" But she also knew that her words were untrue. They were all caught and raped in bed by Yunyang, so there was no point in trying to quibble. She scolded and beat her, until she was not convinced. Jin Lian saw that the momentum was not good and she was not expected to stay for a long time, so she also said, "Don't slap people in the face, and don't expose your shortcomings by scolding people, don't use your power when you have it, and don't chase people away. I am not a wife in your house." One day, I heard the slave whore biting her tongue. And then she sent me out in such a ruthless and merciless manner. It doesn't matter if I go, as long as everyone is strong-willed and stays here, until the end of time without a single word. At that moment, Jinlian and Yunyang were in chaos. I wonder if Yunyang would be able to forgive her if she knelt down to plead for mercy, but that is not Pan Jinlian. Just like this, she had no room to turn around and had to leave. Yunyang went to his room and packed boxes for him, a changing table for sets of clothes, several hairpins and rings, and a quilt. The rest of the shoes and feet he wore were filled in the box. He called Kyuju to the back and locked the door. Before leaving, she didn't forget to take one last look at Simon King and say goodbye to Mengulu. The promise that Simon King and I made to be a long-term couple came to an awkward end when one of them died and the other left. Before Simon King died, he told Yunyang and Jingji, "Stay well with your sisters and live together. Don't get separated and make others laugh. At least we can work together as a family to help your mother live her life. Don't teach people to laugh." It turned into clouds and smoke and has since disappeared. Has Pan Jinlian loved anyone? Does she love Wusong? She liked Wusong, who was tall, mighty and heroic, but the attraction was more due to hormones, not love. Does she love Simon King? Probably loved it, recalling that at the beginning, Simon King had promised to marry her right away, but turned around and married Mengulu first and then took in Sun Zue, but did not enter her door for more than 2 months. She was fascinated and waited and begged. Finally, a small sedan was carried in. Newlyweds couldn't stop Simon King from running to the brothel, and writing love poems to call for his lover didn't help. Perhaps her love gradually faded away. Kintong is the release of her desire after the death of love, and it is also the beginning of her step-by-step decline. At this time, her dream of becoming a wealthy family was shattered, and she returned to Zishi Street and to Mrs. Wang's house where she had a tryst with Simon King. 7 years. What has changed and what has not changed? What did she think? There is no description in the book. Some people use the descriptive techniques of Western novels to analyze and say that if a Western writer wrote about Pan Jinlian at this time, it is very likely to write a large chapter about her psychological activities. It is true that there are differences between Chinese and Western narrative techniques, and Western writers are indeed better at describing the psychological activities of characters. But I suspect that even the best novelist in the West may not be able to write about Pan Jinlian's psychological activities at this time, because she probably really has no mental activity. I often feel that Pan Jinlian is a heartless person. She only cares about the present. When finally her heart was ripped out by Wusong, she finally became a truly heartless person. At this time, if she still has beauty and body, she still has value. And there will be men who want her. Nothing different. So she still dressed up beautifully and stood under the curtain to watch people every day. Just like she did 7 years ago. Who can guarantee that there won't be another Dongmen King walking under the curtain? Pan Jinlian was still dressed the next day, with beautiful eyebrows and beautiful eyes looking at people under the curtain. Sitting on the king with nothing to do, either drawing eyebrows or playing the pipa. Dongmen King was not available for the time being, so that didn't matter. There was also Wang Chaoer now, who was young and strong, and was about as good as a martial artist, so he quickly stabbed him. But at this time, Jin Lian always felt that something was missing. Even though she and Wang Chaoer were in full swing, the words between the words were cold, like a walking zombie muddle along. When Chen Jingji appeared, she finally became a living person, complaining and crying, and all the grievances in her heart poured out. When Chen Jingji promised her to raise money to come back and marry her, she urged him to come back early. Chen Jingji was a man who couldn't hold up a wall, and he was very mean to Sister Ximen. But he was very sincere to Pan Jinlian, more sincere than Sister Hanai and Kuai Ping, who later devoted their lives to him. At this time, he also really wanted to marry Jin Lian. But at this time, he had been kicked out by Wu Yunyang, and there was no hope of getting out the money he had stored in Simon King's house. He himself was almost penniless. A few days ago, when he went to see Chiang Mai, he could easily give 1 tael of silver to Ansu, but now when he came to see Jin Lian, he could only give 2 taels of silver. This shows the difference between the present and the past of Jingji. You know, Mrs. Wang is more greedy and cunning than Mrs. Zhu. Chen Jingji wanted to imitate Simon King and secretly marry Pan Jinlian. But he was afraid that everyone would know that it would not work, and only the person involved would not realize it. This is the last face of Jingji and Jinlian. Look! Wu Erlang is walking through the wind and snow carrying a butcher knife, getting closer and closer step by step. A closer look at Chapter 87 of Jin Ping Mei, the end of the poppy flower, death of the golden lotus. Yayu sighs at me. Everything is in chaos in the world. Chun Mai was sold to Zhou Xiaobai's mansion, and what awaited her was a beautiful life. Pan Jinlian returned to Mrs. Wang's hands, waiting to be sold. Chun Mai sold for 50 taels, Li Jiar sold for 300 taels, and in Wang Po's eyes, Pan Jinlian sold for 100 taels. Pan Jinlian, who has no one in her eyes, has just gained a little wealth, so she doesn't look down on others. This time she must make enough money and squeeze it out, because good things never come true twice. Is it possible for Pan Jinlian to have a man fall into her hands in the future? Pan Jinlian's life is coming to an end, however. Fate gave her a chance. The first person to buy her was her young lover Chen Jingji, but this man who is more capable of destroying himself has no money. He went to Tokyo to raise 100 taels. The second person who wanted to buy Pan Jinlian was Zhang Erguan. Under the encouragement of Earl Ying, he wished he could get Pan Jinlian immediately, but something went wrong in the middle. Earl Ying met Chun Hong on the road and heard him complain. My aunt at home is very strict. All the businesses are closed. The house is sold. The piano boy and the painting boy are gone. The younger one will go back to the south, and I didn't take him with me. I couldn't find anyone to follow him in his city. Earl Ying then enthusiastically came up with an idea. Zhang Er's father's family in the main street has tens of millions of dollars in wealth. When it reaches its peak, your father is serving as the head of the punishment court for thousands of households. When he sees that you can sing southern songs, he will take care of it. Love goes up the pile with just one arrow. When Count Ying went back, he asked for help from Second Officer Zhang and sent a tael of silver to Ximon's house to ask for Chun Hong. The offer was only 1 tael of silver, which was too much to bully the widow Wu Yunyang. Wu Yunyang was frightened by the new executioner, and she did not dare to accept the money, so she offered Chun Hong in vain. Chun Hong is good-looking, can sing, and is diligent in expressing gratitude. Guanzhang got such a young man for nothing. How could he not praise Earl Ying for his intelligence? Zhang Erguan is willing to pay 80 taels to buy Pan Jinlian. But Wang Po died so early that the man was so frightened. It doesn't matter if it's a new executioner. 100 taels of silver cannot be less during the bargaining process. After Zhang Erguan learned about Pan Jinlian's past from Chun Hong and Li Jiar, he said to Count Ying, "My family now has a 15-year-old boy studying at school. Why should such a woman come to the house? It's time to mention Pan Jinlian." Earl Ying kidnapped Chun Hong and raped Pan Jinlian. Pity. In addition to Chen Jingyi and Zhang Erguan, Peng Chun Mai also wanted to pay a high price for Pan Jinlian. Zhou Xiaobai was a military commander, and a beautiful woman like Peng Chun Mai, who was fierce and had the aura of a queen, fell in love with him. She loved Chun Mai so much that she set up a second house with a house and a girl. Most importantly, she let Chun Mai's housekeeper take care of the keys. When Chun Mai heard that Pan Jinlian was waiting to be sold, she praised Pan Jinlian in front of Zhou Shubei for her beauty, talent, and intelligence. She also cried and complained about Pan Jinlian's kindness to her. He couldn't caress me with his arrogance. I treat Cheng like a biological daughter. And then asked if you are willing to marry him. I would like to be the third one. Zhou Xiaobai had no intention of marrying again, but he was happy to enjoy the blessings of everyone. He ordered Zhang Shang and Li En to go to Wang Po's house to see her, and offered 80 taels, but Wang Po refused. When Chun Mai heard about it, she cried again. At least I can add a few taels of silver, marry and be a slave, and I will be willing to die. Zhou Xiaobai was promoted to a higher level and sent the chief steward Zhou Zhang to buy it with 90 taels of silver. Wang Po saw that Pan Jinlian was so popular that buyers were vying for it, so she insisted on asking for 100 taels. Seeing Chun Mei's insistence, Zhou Xiaobai ordered him to bring 100 taels to bring Jin Lian home tomorrow. But Zhou Zhang, the chief steward, was angry because Wang Po was an old whore who doesn't even know anyone. She was so disrespectful. When Kai Taishi's housekeeper Ku wanted to buy a girl, Simon King gave her a complete dowry. In Dream of Red Mansions, Prince Zhongshan sent his steward to talk to concubine Yuan's family. And concubine Yuan's father received her in person without daring to express his dignity. Of course Zhou Zhang's status is not as high as theirs, but in King County, except for a few officials who have very good personal relationships with Zhou Xiaobai, no one can fawn over him. And no one dares not to give him a little favor. Now Zhou Zhang came in person. And the cash was ready, but Wang Po refused to sell it. The soft food was too soft and he wouldn't even eat the hard food. Lian threatened to take her to a prison cell and have a good meal with him, but Wang Po didn't let go. This is simply not taking people seriously. Wang Po is tough, but she has never seen the world. If this matter had been replaced by Mrs. Su, and Zhou Xiaobai's housekeeper had arrived in person, she would have put a smile on her face and thought of staying to eat and drink. As for the silver, I said yesterday that I would give it 80 taels. So naturally I had to take out the 10 taels and stuff them into the hands of the gentleman. Only by accepting it can they feel at ease that there will be no surprises in this transaction. If the reception is satisfactory and Pan Jinlian is made happy, she will have an excuse to interact with Zhou Xiaobai's family frequently. And she is afraid that she will not have a chance to earn back the 10 taels. Chen Jingji, Zhang Erguan, and Zhou Xiaobai, no matter whether they were sentimental, wealthy, or powerful, these people who could change Pan Jinlian's life were turned away by Wang Po's wealth, power. The next buyer is Wu Song. The novel flashes back to the world of heroes in Liangshan. 6 or 7 years after time was frozen by Lanling Zhao Xiaosheng, Wu Song returned. In the past few years, he has been walking around the world, being rescued and framed, gratifying revenge, killing people and escaping for his life. This life of burning passion and ups and downs is no paler and mediocre than Pan Jinlian. Under the general amnesty, Wu Song, who killed Zhang Dujian, Zhang Mention and the whole family, returned to King County with Xian's 100 taels of silver, and still served as the head of the county. When I heard that Simon King was dead, and that Pan Jinlian was selling at Mrs. Wang's house, she came to see her. Pan Jinlian was still standing under the curtain. Back then, she stood under the curtain and watched people. She once fell in love with Wu Song, and her innocent first love was humiliated by the ethics of her brother and sister-in-law. Later, she met Simon King. Like Li Pinger, she ran wildly on the road of desire to kill people. Several years have passed, and her world has not changed at all. She is still poor and has no freedom, and is still a commodity waiting to be sold. If she could make the decision, would she choose to wander around the world with Chen Mai, pouring all the men in the world? And earlier, if Wuhan University gave her freedom, she would choose Wu Song. If that were the case, if Wu Song asked her to guard the fence, she would be willing to guard it. A man like Wu Song would not flirt with Qin Machu, making people worry about him scratching other women in their dreams. Today, she is still watching people from behind the curtain, however. This time, when she saw Wu Song, she ducked inside. A few years later, Wu Song became a social expert. He sat down for tea and exchanged greetings. Wu Song seemed particularly polite. People who know etiquette are easy to trust and relax. Wu Song ate his tea and said, "Don't you dare to bother my mother and tell your sister-in-law that if he doesn't get married, that's fine. If he does get married, if Yinger grows up, he can go to his sister-in-law's house and take care of Yinger. Sooner or later, he will find a son-in-law, and the whole family will be happy to make a living. I don't teach others to make jokes." Pan Jinlian, who has made a mess of her life, has never cared about money and power, unlike Wu Yunyang, who is greedy for money, arrogant, stupid and stubborn. She is also not like Li Jier, who is completely heartless and has no vitality. She just needs to steal some gold and silver to have a stable life. Even Sun Zue later stole gold and silver and ran to the New World. Pan Jinlian never thought about taking advantage of the chaos and stealing a huge amount of jewelry like Li Pinger did. Her passion and courage for life were all directed towards love and sex. Everything else has nothing to do with her. It was pointless for her to have a good relationship with a man. Wu Song was a man, and she liked him at first sight. She had no idea that even when Simon King was rich, she took a fancy to him. When Pan Jinlian looks for a man, if there are any additional conditions, he must be good-looking. The 3 senses followed the 5 senses, and she was the one I was talking about. The French female writer Sagan wrote in The Lonely Pond, dragging at a leisurely pace, being true to one's heart, moving from one goal to another, from one bed to another, from one passion to another passion, always hit the wall, hurt everywhere, often cynical. This kind of lifestyle and orientation is the privilege of men in a patriarchal society. Even if the modern marriage system enters monogamy, men with some financial resources will still have this way of life in their spare time. Of course, it's also Pan Jinlian's. In essence, she and another Liuer, Wang Liuer, are the same kind. If her husband is devoted to her, she can leave all her passion and future to him. As for an open relationship, she actually does not yearn for it. If her husband wants to use her body as a tool to make money, maybe her tolerance is even lower than Wang Liuer's. For Pan Jinlian, poverty is nothing if there is a pleasant person. When she was with Wu Da, she never thought Wu Da was poor, and she even used her few jewelry to help Wu Da buy a house and do business. At that time, she was dressed sexily and smelled sexy, but she didn't wear anything sewn up. She just wants to find a pleasant person. In the past, Pan Jinlian liked to ask Simon King for all kinds of beautiful clothes and jewelry, but what she liked was not the mink kerms at all, but the proof of love. Later, she fought over the mink coat because she was angry with them and wanted to prove that Simon King cared about her more. If she is the only husband, why should she be aggressive? Chen Jingji had countless opportunities to steal gold and silver, but they never thought about stealing and elopement. Chen Jingji's worthless gifts can make her satisfied and happy. If Wuhan University had not been greedy for the treasure Pan Jinlian that Zhang Dahu kept in his home, and if Zhang Dahu died and let her go or sold her to Simon King, everyone would be different. However, as the stupid Wu Yunyang said later, it's hard to buy a lot of money. Pan Jinlian, who neither loves money nor power, heard Wu Song say one family can live together, and it was like a thunderbolt. After years of vicissitudes, Wu Song is certainly more heroic and reckless, which means that his appearance is even higher. A few years ago, Pan Jinlian met Wu Song for the first time and was immediately moved. It turned out that her marriage was with him. Now, her love brain was wrong again. My marriage is still in his hands. He couldn't wait for Wang Po to call him, so he came out by himself, wished Wu Song good luck, and said, "Since I'm an uncle, I still want a servant to take care of Yinger and recruit a son-in-law to start a family." How good is that? Pan Jinlian agreed, and the deal was naturally completed. Wu Song gave Wang Po an extra 5 taels to thank the matchmaker. Wang Po was so happy that she peed and praised Wu Song. "I have seen a lot of things in the world. He is really a good man." Pan Jinlian ordered tea, which was thick, as if she was passionately looking forward to the future, and handed it to Wu Song to eat with both hands. Chen Jingji is on his way to Tokyo. Second Officer Zhang has given up on Pan Jinlian. Zhou Zhang, the guarded housekeeper, is angry and thinks about punishing Wang Po for buying Jinlian in a few days. Destiny is determined to achieve Wu Song's success. Wang Po dropped 20 taels of silver and gave it to Wu Yunyang. After Yunyang knew that the buyer was Wuer, she secretly stumbled. As the saying goes, an enemy has a clear eye when he sees his enemy. She said to Meng Yulu, "I will just die in the hands of his brother-in-law." How can that man kill someone without killing him with his eyes? Get some rest. Pan Jinlian was greedy for love and Wang Po was greedy for money. They were confused and blinded by grease, not knowing that there was a dead end ahead. Now that someone has seen through her fate, will she keep silent or remind her immediately? A person's character and friendship with others will be revealed at this time. Pan Jinlian wanted everything from Simon King, and it was destined that all the wives and concubines of Simon King's family were her enemies. Wu Yunyang's character was not good, and she had deep conflicts with Pan Jinlian. She didn't care about Pan Jinlian's life or death. As for Meng Yulu, the two began to become good friends. She knew everything about Pan Jinlian, Shutong, and Chen Jingji, but she never told the truth and would cover up when necessary. But Pan Jinlian had an affair with Meng Yulu's book boy, and Meng Yulu lost a boy in vain and was very embarrassed. On Meng Yulu's birthday, Pan Jinlian also wanted to stop Simon King from sleeping in her room. Watching Li Ping'er and her son being killed by Pan Jinlian with a cold eye, Meng Yulu only felt chilled to his bones. Later, he never saw her taking the initiative to visit Pan Jinlian again. As for the hairpin Pan Jinlian gave her when she left, it was just thank you for not harming me. If we meet again, please continue not to harm me. So, fate is unpredictable. And finally it was Pan Jinlian's turn. This most beautiful poppy flower in the world is sexy and beautiful. After all the vicissitudes of life, it still has vigorous hope for the future and is full of passion for the man who is about to come. She had a new hairdo, a red dress, and a hijab. When I entered the door, there were no red candles burning high, and happy words posted on the window. But I only saw the spiritual plaque of Wuhan University. Pan Jinlian, who was dazzled by Wu Song, still realized it later, and felt suspicious in her heart, but still walked in the door and faced her death. Wu Song ordered Yinger to fasten the front and back doors, put out wine and food, and ate 4 or 5 bowls of them himself. Then he pulled out a simple knife from under his clothes, stuck it on the table, tied up Po Wang, and pulled out the live-in Pan Jinlian and personally tried the death case of Wu Da. Wu Song's knife touched Pan Jinlian's pink and tender face, turning it coldly and then turning it coldly back. Pan Jinlian was not a specially trained spy who broke through the defense in an instant and used all his moves. Then, the bloodiest scene in Jin Ping Mei came. Wu Song was standing in front of the soul, holding the woman with one hand, pouring wine with the other hand, lighting the paper money. He threw a handful of incense ash into the furnace and stuffed it in his Pan Jinlian mouth. I can't scream. Then he smashed his brains to the ground. The woman struggled and the hairpin ring rolled off her hair. Wu Song was afraid that he would struggle, so he first kicked his ribs with his oil boots, then stepped on his arms with his feet, and said, "Whore, you say you are smart, but I don't know how your heart is born. Let me try and take a look." At the same time, he spread his chest with his hands, saying it was too late. But soon, he took the knife to the woman by Fufu's heart and dug out a bloody hole, and the blood came out. The woman's eyes were half gleaming, and her feet were just stepping forward. With the knife in his mouth, Wu Song used his hands to open his chest. And with a begging sound, he tore out his heart, liver and 5 internal organs, and offered the blood in front of his soul. His head was cut off with a knife from behind, and blood flowed all over the ground, even though Pan Jinlian is a poppy flower that can produce methamphetamine. Seeing this extremely beautiful and enchanting flower being ravaged by bulldozers still makes one feel distressed, regretful, and trembling. What's more, this woman, fate never gave her a chance. There are too many men and women like her. If she was born into the Wang family in a dream of red mansions, she would probably be Wang Shifeng, a jealous man who could beat a girl's head to pieces in front of her husband. If she was born into a man in the Zhu family, it would just be sex and anger. Zhu Pan has had enough of the opposite sex playing with the same sex. If she is lucky enough to be born in a modern society, she does not have to poison Wu Da to death. She can just walk away. Even if he is still confused about worldly affairs and finds a new wife without getting divorced, it is just a small fine for bigamy. If the misfortune continued, the person she met again would be more incapable of controlling her lower body than Simon King, so she stomped away. No matter how bad she is about planning, no matter how much she ruins her destiny, she will just become a canary. And how much worse can she be? If you're a little luckier, you might become a legend. Pan Jinlian was able to marry into a wealthy family from a little tailor's daughter who couldn't support herself. In a normal society, if she was so talented, beautiful, smart, and versatile, and also so fond of tossing and competitive, how could she not have a better life? French female writer Sagan said, "Life is a drag race, and I have the right to self-destruct." I have always been curious about whether her soul had stayed in Pan Jinlian's body. This girl was pampered until she was 18 years old. She wrote Hello, Sorrow in 2 months, won the French Critics' Prize, and sold 5 million copies. after receiving a large amount of royalties. Her father thought, "It is really dangerous for you to have such a large amount of money at your age. Spend it." From then on, she regarded carpe diem as the motto of her life. She loved parties and spent extravagantly. She flirted with men in smoky underground dance halls, got drunk in bars, took drugs, gambled, and drove herself to death with her brother. And years in the hospital, life is completely unknown and crazy. It is clear that the years can be peaceful, but they must be wild and uninhibited. She said in Hello, Sorrow, "I want to live a mean and shameless life. This is my ideal." She practices it and expresses it calmly in her words. Philosophers believe that life is meaningless, but in order to survive, one must find the meaning of life. And no matter how strange human beings are, the meanings they can find are only three categories: various meanings based on usefulness, or not; various meanings based on right and wrong; various meanings based on beauty, or beauty, emotion and ruthlessness. Obviously, the first two categories are good at judging, useful, and the three-dimensional coordinates of right and wrong are certain. However, all the richness and variety of this world is due to the existence of the third category of people, including Sagan, Pan Jinlian, Jia Baoyu, Li Yu, Song Hizong, Duo Nianyang, Wu Song, etc., and their claims that love is death, not a proper settlement at all. People can be destroyed, but they cannot be defeated. My ashes are hotter than their lives. Previously, it is easy for the two types of people to condescendingly look down on the third type, and then make judgments such as useful, incompetent, kind, evil, just, correct. But there are many people in the world who are crazy about Sagan, including the former French Prime Minister Raffarin. However, in Jin Ping Mei, Pan Jinlian can only be a prostitute and a poisonous woman. Many people come to seek her life. She never reflects on herself and refuses to atone for her sins and repent. She is just an easy, but one day she will be the same. On the one hand, he is naive and never makes plans. On the other hand, his inner worries accumulate into the power to destroy others, and he ends up drifting away from his loved ones, approaching death without anyone stopping him. And she, who has been learning to seduce men since she was a child, only wants to rely on another shoulder to escape the loneliness in the world. But she herself couldn't notice this, which was really sad. Yinger was so frightened by the bloody scene that she just covered her face. This poor girl. When Pan Jinlian tortured her, her father never thought of giving Pan Jinlian her freedom and replacing her with a homely woman to take care of her. Yinger saw how her father Wu Da died. Now, her uncle never thought that she would be afraid and let her witness the murder with her own eyes. When she said she was afraid, her uncle said, "My child, I don't care about you anymore," and left like the wind with the pleasure of revenge. Yinger was left alone to deal with the officials who came for interrogation. Yinger is the only blood relative of Wu Da, Wu Song, who keeps claiming revenge for his brother, never thinks about organizing a dowry for Yinger and finding a good man to settle down with. Finally, an unrelated neighbor, Yao Erlang, brought her out and arranged a marriage for her. Wu Song didn't have time to make arrangements to welcome his son, but he just didn't see his niece. As for the Han Daoguo family, which is shameless sexual concepts, Honor, who once missed his sister-in-law, met his fleeing niece in the chaos of war, hugged each other, supported her all the way to find her relatives, and finally reunited. The hero Wu Song has no nostalgia for the fireworks in the world. What he likes is power and revenge. Just like Pan Jinlian likes love and sex, neither of them can resist the passion, originality, and pleasure in it. If Pan Jinlian killed Li Pinger and his son were innocent, then Wu Song killed Zhang Mention's son and daughter. There are no heroes or beauties. If Pan Jinlian is a prostitute and a poisonous woman, Wu Song is just a wild beast. In this way, Pan Jinlian's death at the hands of Wu Song was far better than death from an illness or the hands of an ordinary man. Wu Song, this man, is so ruthless. The author couldn't help but write this sentence, just like he once wrote down the life that Pan Jinlian had taken one by one. In fact, he was also saying, Jinlian, this prostitute, was very cruel. Poison, the author makes them entangle and meet. which is the way to pierce the abyss of the black hole of human nature, so that readers will not dare to feel sad or happy after reading. A closer look at Chapter 88 of Jin Ping Mei, Pan Jinlian Syrup. Pan Jinlian died. Her bloody body fell to the ground. Her heart, liver and 5 internal organs were stuck in the eaves of the house. Even though she had boasted in the past that she would be buried in dead streets and buried in dead roads, and she would be buried in a coffin in the ditch, she never expected that death would be so bloody and violent. When alive, the body cannot be the master. After death, the body cannot be the master either. She was Simon King's concubine. Wu Yunyang asked Wang Po to marry her, but she had no choice. After her death, the government and the Simon family had to decide on the body. Everyone in King County must be aware of the huge tragedy, but the Simon family is silent. Only Chen Mai of the guard's house cried so much that she didn't even eat or drink, and didn't care about anything else. It's only one day in heaven, but 100 years on earth. Pan Jinlian is separated from Yin and Yang, and Chen Jingji is still running around raising money. On the way back to Tokyo, the news that Chen's father was seriously ill also reached him. Chen Jingji hurried on even more quickly, walking twice every time. Arriving at the capital, Chen Hong was gone. The famous family of Admiral Yang, the 800,000-strong imperial guard in Tokyo, who had been Simon King's capital to show off in King County, now passed away without a trace. The only trace of sadness came from his old wife Shang. My son Chen Jingji felt joy in his heart. Although his father was gone, his mother loved him again. Later, he married Pan Jinlian and lived a happy life. Probably because he had been living as a sojourner for too long, even if he became the head of the Chen family. Chen Jingji still couldn't change his parasitic thinking, so he sent 2 cars of soft boxes and cages to his home, just like when he was the son-in-law of Simon King's family. As long as he spent some money and secretly had an affair with Jin Lian, he could stay comfortably for a long time. It's a pity that sweet dreams are always easy to wake up from. When I came to Wang Po's house on Zixi Street, I was thinking about it. There were 2 corpses buried there, and there was a sign to rest Wu Song. Jingji raised his head and saw it, and immediately opened his eyes. From joy to happiness to sadness to pain, it only takes a moment. The text is extremely simple, but the emotions are extremely deep. This is the beauty of Jin Ping Mei and the complexity of life. Just like we saw Chen Jingji doing the trips, walking on the road, but we didn't expect that he was so happy for his father's death. Chen Jingji was in severe pain and had no words to express. When asked by outsiders, he could only answer calmly, "The woman who killed her was my father-in-law's son, Pan. I didn't know he was killed. I just saw the notice and found out why. I endured it until night, bought a bunch of money paper and burned it with golden lotuses, and prayed secretly. You were a human when alive, and a god after death. May you have captured your enemy Wu Song early and avenged you. I watched the execution on the execution ground. He can take advantage of my life ambition. It is a pity that Pan Jinlian could not be a comfortable person when he was alive, and he could not be a god after death." Her ghost wandered into Chen Jingji's dream, begging and begging. "My brother, I died in such a miserable way. I really expected to be with you, but when you didn't come, I was killed by Wu Song. Now that the underworld has not taken hold of me, I wander around during the day and return home at night. I searched everywhere for blood and water, and you gave me a piece of money and paper at the right time. But the enemy didn't find it. My body was buried in the street. You can remember the old feelings and buy a coffin to bury it, so that it won't be buried for a long time." Exposed. In the 62nd chapter, when Li Pinger made funeral arrangements, he told her to be buried next to the grave of the First Lady. It would be more convenient to grab some liquid in the morning and evening. Although Li Pinger's life is short, he said goodbye calmly in the end. Jin Lian, who had a hard mouth and a hard heart, was the one who avoided death the most, so she could only ask for some water temporarily. Wu Song was unable to capture the body, and the family members buried the body. Wang Chao took away the body of his mother, Wang Po, leaving behind Pan Jinlian, who had quenched their thirst for each other. I wonder if the shroud used Erasmus's. Wang is the one made by Jin Lian in the past. There was no movement from the Ximen family, who had taken over the family status. Fortunately, there were still people who really cared about her in this world. Although Chen Jingji could not make the decision, Chen Mai sent Zhang Shang and Lian to the county to inquire about it every 2 or 3 days. But maybe the family members she ordered were slacking off, but in the end it was Pan Jinlian who had entrusted the dream. After Chen Mai woke up, she ordered Zhang Shang and Lian to inquire about the situation. Without telling Zhou Xiaobai, she took out the body, stuffed the heart and liver into the belly, sewed it up with thread, dressed it up properly, put it in a coffin, and buried it in Yangfu Temple. Then the elders were invited to recite sutras and paper money was used to worship. Pan Jinlian finally got her juice. By coincidence, Chen Hong was also buried in Yangfu Temple. If there is a soul in heaven, I'm afraid he would rather not be buried here. Watching Nizzy finish crying my sixth sister, it was his turn to burn paper as a sacrifice to himself. In any case, the Chen family has finally entered a new stage. Just like the orphans and widowers of the Ximen family have adapted to the loneliness of a deserted family and few carriages. The weather is warm, women watch the traffic and horses at the gate, and the crowd is lively. First, she saw the fat monk. Wu Yunyang gave him a monk's hat, a pair of monk's shoes, a sling of copper coins, and a bucket of white rice. She also joked with Xiao Yu. Later I saw Mrs. Su again. Now she is following Zhang'er's father and Chen Mai, the new guard's favorite, so naturally she doesn't even come to Ximen Mansion. Sister-in-law Zhu brought the latest news from King County. When Chen Hong passed away, sutras were recited and sent out, and he was buried at the grave. As the in-laws, Wu Yunyang and the eldest sister Ximen, the daughter-in-law of the Chen family, did not come forward, which would be inappropriate. Wu Yunyang only said she didn't know, which probably meant she really didn't know. What she knew was that Pan's brother-in-law ate him and killed him, and buried them together with Mrs. Wang. Po Su said casually that Chen Mai couldn't get over the love of a woman, so she sent someone to buy a coffin, take his body, and bury it. The old enemy Sun Zui immediately became suspicious. How long has Chen Mai been in the garrison's mansion and he has grown up like this? He took out the money in his hand and bought a coffin for him to bury. The garrison was not angry at all. Who do you think he is? Yes, it costs money to bury Jinlian. The right to speak. How long has it been since Chen Mai entered the garrison? Yunyang and Zui didn't believe it. They didn't want to believe it. Just like what Nyan Yu Nyan kept saying. I just don't believe it. They say that he wears a beaded crown later, and he is a lady. Our family has no officials. So why ask for a beaded crown? Even if he wears a beaded crown, it won't be his turn. The wheel of fate is rolling forward. Believe it or not. What does it matter?
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.